We're going to get started, so if you grab a seat. Includes you, Jamie, in the back. I see you. I guess this is the trick to have a reading, is to have lots of authors show up and they bring a few people. Because whenever I have my readings, there's like, 8 people. So, this is good. Welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's a great turnout for Masons Road for a great event, a great journal, and a great editor. My name is Michael White. I'm the director of the Fairfield MFA program. I welcome you here. I want to congratulate all of the authors. I want to congratulate the staff that put this together, and I especially want to congratulate Lisa Calderon, whose idea this was, hard work, vision, put all this together. It's one of the best. I've been in literary magazines for about 22 years, and this is one of the best literary magazines I've seen. And the amazing thing, it's come out on a shoestring and so quickly. Lisa will probably say something about the shoestring shortly, make it a little bit bigger. But I'd like to introduce Lisa. Is she here?
Yep. Okay, thanks, Michael. I'm so glad to see so many familiar and new faces. I'm very excited to be here tonight. This program is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be experimental. You'll have to bear with us. But right now you'll have to bear with me to say a few words about Masons Road and its history, for those of you who might not be too familiar with it. As many of you know, Masons Island Road is a curvy country lane that leads from the busy commercial properties of Route 1 in Mystic, Connecticut, to the enchanting retreat space us Fairfield MFAers have come to know as Enders. Enders is a place, a time, a stage in our writing life, where we wrestle with and eventually conquer our words and forge our identities as writers. When we first step foot on the island, we could be in our 20s or 80s or anywhere in between, but invariably 2 years later we leave transformed. What transforms us are the conversations we have, the community we build, the craft skills we polish, and the courage we find within ourselves to speak our truths as writers. And Masons Island Road leads us there. The first time I traveled Masons Road, it was as the web liaison on the Fairfield University marketing team that was launching the program. For me, it was a day off from the office, same 50-minute commute, but in the opposite direction. I was fine getting off the highway, heading down Route 27 to Route 1, spotting Tapers Inn and the Masons Island sign. But of course, once I was on that road, I got lost. Anyone who knows me wouldn't be surprised. The directions say to bear left at all forks and follow the signs for Enders Island, but the signs are subtle, and the road is windy, and I must have gone straight when I was supposed to go left, and I'm sure I was late, but eventually I got there. And when I did, when I found Enders, with its jutting dramatic boulders and its wind and sea and solace, I knew I'd be back. For months leading into that first journey down Masons Road, I had sat in on marketing meetings where Michael would talk about a writer's community and the writing craft, and how important they both were to the success of the program. Like many writers, I'm an introvert, and talk of a writer's community didn't have much of an impact on me. And the writing craft, yeah, I guess it's important, but, you just gotta write, and if you're any good, it'll all come together, craft or no craft, right? I sat in on those meetings, privately considering the MFA. But it wasn't until I stepped onto the grounds of Enders that I knew. Michael's unyielding passion for the program, the drama of the place, my mounting desire to take my writing skills to the next level, I knew I'd be traveling down Masons Road again, wherever it would lead, even if I would take the wrong turn once or twice more. About 2 years later, on January 2nd, 2010, I crashed on Masons Island. I was a year into the program, at my third residency, and just coming back from the New Year's break between workshops when it started to snow. Delicately at first, then furiously the further I drove. I cautiously steered my 1999 white Toyota Camry down Route 1 to Tapers Inn turned right at the Masons Island Road sign, left at the first fork, and then my tires turned right at their own will, and I crashed into a road sign. The right front of my car peeled open like a sardine can. That was the semester we launched our program's literary journal. Those on the original editorial team, 1/3 of the student body at the time. Do you remember the email debate we had about naming our journal? I was fixed on something nautical sounding, something that resounded of enders, fair winds, sound waves, paper nautilus. Yet the name I kept going back to came from Kelly Cobney, one of our poetry editors, Mason's Road. It wasn't nautical at all. It wasn't mystical or seafaring, or my quote at the time, fresh as the wind that surrounds us twice a year at Enders. It was practical, grounded, durable. And it lent itself well to Michael's emphasis on the craft of writing, because we weren't just looking for a name for the journal, we were looking for a mission. Ravi Shankar, our current faculty advisor and founding editor of Drunken Boat, one of the world's oldest electronic literary journals, advised me during the research stage to find an angle for something that hasn't been done yet, add something new to the literary landscape. Here's what we saw in Mason's Road. From the flurry of 35 emails on naming our journal came one dated March 10th, 2010 from Donna Orazio. I love the image of a mason taking the jumbled pile of rocks, seemingly a random mix of size, shapes, and colors, one by one piecing them together, finding the right combinations, but sometimes having to go back, redo, reshape, until he creates something strong and finished, something that will last, will survive the test of time. There was great strength, as well as honesty, beauty, and hard work in the effort that a mason exerts to complete his masterpiece. Isn't that what we do with our words? Honest work, one word at a time, to complete something strong, unique on our road as writers. From Annabelle Mosley, a road connects the traveler to the destination, but itself is a place of liminality, and in between time. From the Wikipedia definition, liminality is a period of transition where normal limits to thought, self-understanding, and behavior are relaxed, a situation which can lead to new perspectives. This sense of transition and dropping normal limits of self-understanding could be encouraged in the work we solicit. And from Steve Afanasky, road is a good literary word that's worked for every writer from Jack Kerouac to Cormac McCarthy. As for me, well, the name of my blog tracking my research at the time was called Journey of a Literary Journal. And my first blog post was all about how much I had always loved road trips. By then I knew Mason's Road would work for us because a road, like literary journals, like the writing process itself, takes you down a path where you can get lost, or crash, or reach your destination just fine. And taking to any road, literary or not, takes a certain amount of purpose, of conviction, of courage and confidence that you'll arrive somewhere else. For our editorial team, traveling down Mason's Road is about having the conviction to stand up for a piece even when others don't get it. I saw this again and again with both readers and editors who fought for a piece that ended up getting published, and I saw them build confidence through this decision-making process. For our readers, it takes conviction to be the first to read a submission and speak up about it, to share what worked, what didn't, the maybe yeses and maybe nos and the whys. For our genre editors, it takes confidence to select their favorites and say, I love this piece just the way it is, or this piece if I could work with the author to make a few tweaks, like when Chris found our award-winning piece, Away in the Wilderness, that we'll hear tonight. For the editor-in-chief, Yana, for our upcoming issue, it's about the conviction and confidence to pick a craft theme and stick by it, to navigate your editorial team through the ups and downs of submissions and selections, and to pick your favorites in the end from the genre editor recommendations, weighing in with the final word. And for the managing editor test, this next issue, it's about the conviction and confidence to take on the formidable task of publishing, marketing, budgeting, operating, producing, without a publisher tending to the operational and promotional details of a publication. It doesn't matter whether or not the editorial team found a brilliant piece of writing. Publishing is the blacktop of our road. And most especially for the writers and artists who come to masonsroad.com and submit, It's about the courage to do so and be judged, to either get rejected, to crash, or get selected, to get the green light, putting your work out there for the world to read. For those contributors with us tonight, it's also about the courage to stand up here and read your work, to say, this is my voice, and thank you for listening. At the end of Mason's Island Road is a bridge that gets us to Enders. It's a pretty dramatic one, lined with boulders, opening up to sea and sky and all the possibilities they imply, welcoming us to a place, a time, a new stage in our writing lives. Likewise, Mason's Road, the journal, has a bridge to the wider literary community, the one off our island. It's a bridge to readers from 57 countries who have checked out our magazine and started an open-ended dialogue about our literature through exactly 101 comments to date. It's a bridge to creative writing classes, courses, and workshops throughout the country as we put plans in place to package and promote our audio interviews with experts on craft as part of curriculum development. And it's a bridge to aspiring and renowned writers from around the world, to Pulitzer Prize-winning authors like Philip Schultz and William Kennedy, who were published in our first 2 issues, and outstanding established writers like Leah Pepora and Rina Espeland, who dared me to wear red shoes tonight. And if you want to know why, you'll have to read her poem in our first issue. And it's a bridge to new, unexpected, emerging voices like we'll hear in a few minutes. I love that there's a strong showing of the editorial team tonight because our first year of publication has truly been a collaborative accomplishment. I hope the journal continues to grow as a vehicle for our MFA grad students to bond together, to acquire real-world skills, to learn to navigate through different personalities and competencies just as one would in the workplace. It's been an extraordinary learning curve for all of us, and we are most certainly still on it. But let's take a collective sigh of relief and celebrate where we are right now in the company of literary artists and supporters with 2 successful issues behind us. And let's also take this moment to be grateful for this opportunity. On behalf of the Mason's Road editorial team, I want to say thank you to Michael for the support of Fairfield University, for teaching us to care more about community and craft, for providing the myriad venues of conversations about the writing life on and off Enders, and for nurturing our confidence, conviction, and courage as lifetime learners to write, to edit, and to publish. So that's all I want to say about Mason's Road. So now for tonight's programming. Literary journals are meant to be experimental. So that is what we're going to be doing tonight with these Skype readings. I'd like you to know that we did some testing today. Our first Skype reader is from India, and her connection is not really secure. So if she freezes in the middle of things, or her words aren't matching her mouth, or something like that happens, we might move on to the next reader and then bring her back when this connection is stronger. So let's see how things go tonight. And I'm very happy to bring up Chris now to introduce our award-winning piece, our first Creative Writing Prize, to Joseph Jordan. I'm thrilled to have him.
Hiya. It's a real pleasure to introduce C. Joseph Jordan and to award him the first Mason's Road Creative Writing Prize. As fiction co-editor of Mason's Road during its first year, I read a lot of stories, and a few of them were very good. A few were very bad. Maybe more than a few. A lot were somewhere in between. When I read the first pages of Joseph's story, Away in the Wilderness, I knew it was going to be, at the very least, in the very good category. As I read on, I grew more and more excited, wondering if this guy would be able to pull it off. It's like watching a major leaguer pitching a no-hitter. The first few innings are fun, but then it starts to get intense. When I finished the story, I breathed a huge sigh of relief and felt very strongly that it was something we should publish and that I had to be the one to work with Joseph on fine-tuning it. The end result, I think, is a story that's as good as any you'll find anywhere. I'm happy to say that Joseph, I found out tonight, was accepted to the MFA program at the University of Minnesota recently, where they accept 4 students per year. It's a 3-year program, tuition all paid. So I really feel like we've found somebody at the beginning of a very long and illustrious career. Please welcome C. Joseph Jordan. Thank you, sir.
I wore this shirt because I thought it had a pocket right here. It totally doesn't. We're going to put this back here and try to pretend it's not there. Okay, so with just 10 minutes, I had to sort of go into the middle of the story and find something, so I'll give you a little debrief on where we are. The story is about a guy named Desmond who wakes up on the coldest morning of the year to find that his dogs have escaped his barn and have been fighting with coyotes, and he's riding his horse across the high desert of Oregon looking for one of these dogs. And as we dip in here, he's starting to think about his friend Gary Duchamps. And let's see, a couple names you need to know. There's his friend Gary, his horse's name is Zorro, and he has a daughter named Shannon, and I think that's going to be it. Okay. I used to have this friend, Gary Duchamps, who lived a little closer to town than I did on a ranch that was a good piece smaller than ours, maybe 700 acres. He was a good old boy, tall as a fir tree and a hell of a basketball player. We graduated the same year, got drafted not 10 days apart, both missed the real shit in NAM by pure freak flukes of where we got assigned. Gary sent up to Korea, me to a desk job in Saigon because they gave me some test that said I had a head for numbers. Came home, got married, and so on until by about 30 years ago we were both running our family ranches. We were peas in a pod, me and Gary. Did the Rotary together, went fishing and hunting. He had a real thing for hunting turkeys. He just liked killing them. Said he didn't like their looks. Well, about 20 years ago, the town started to change. All those Californians started trucking up here, as though all of them at once got tired of the sunshine and decided to come up and get blasted out by the wind. They'd come and go skiing on Quigley Butte and think, hell, I like this town. And they were all what they call house rich. They bought houses back in the 60s and 70s, and now they were worth 10, 15, 20 times as much as they were back in those days. So they sold up those houses and come on up to this little town in the high desert. 200,000 people moved to Letchers County since 1990, which might not seem like so much until you realize we were only 45,000 here to begin with. And there was money on the wind, I tell you. Lots of people got rich. Developers, contractors, lawyers, landowners. Nobody wanted to stop it, though we used to have a pretty little town out here, and it was becoming an ugly mess in an awful hurry. And Gary wasn't dumb. He could smell that money. I went hunting with him in the spring of '92, I think it was, and the whole time he kept telling me, Desmond, there's a big bucket that's coming this way, and you and me, we better get a drink from it before it goes on by. I thought it was just talk. He said it every time we'd go out there. He'd say, there's a bucket, Des, and there's a ladle in it. He said it so many times it quit meaning anything, until he did it. 7 years ago he sold, made more than $1 million, then moved to the valley to be near his kids and grandkids. I remember I went around his place, and he had this brand new pickup he just bought, candy red, and he'd loaded a bunch of barrels of home-brewed beer in the back. He left it idling in the driveway while we said goodbye. And he said it again. Des, he said, it's coming at you. Don't wait too long. He was smiling when he said it. We just started the new business then, giving up real ranching, which wasn't paying the bills anyhow. And sold off the last of the livestock, built the new barn, started renting out stalls to the rich folks who came up here from California and wanted to play cowboy but didn't know how to take care of a horse. It was all Dottie's idea. Big gamble, biggest of my life. I didn't want to bail out on it right then, not right when we just started. It wasn't long before we started getting offers, though. I'm sorry. I'm finding it a little distracting. It's okay. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Anyway, it wasn't long before we started getting offers, though. We got them pretty steady for a long time, each one a little bigger than the last, but we kept turning them down. Business was good. Actually, we had more money than we knew what to do with for a while. And I guess we thought one day there'd be one so big we couldn't say no. We never talked about a number. I never let myself think about it like that. And then one day it was over. The bucket had passed us by. The market bust and the bank started collapsing. We lost a third of our business. Suddenly the desert around town was cut up by scars where folks had started out to subdivide a ranch, pave it up and plant lawns. And when the money ran out, All that was left there were these empty mud pits pocked with unused pipes and wires that wobbled in the wind. The old Duchamp's place is like that now. They tore down Gary's house, cut out the pond of roses, and all it's got there is a bunch of decaying streets and a big stone sign with the absurd name Whispering Pines on it out by the main road. Gary, he's on the wind. I haven't seen him nor spoken to him since the day he told me not to wait. Moving fast along the river flats, wind stinging my eyes, all I thought about was the trail, the blood, the paw prints, the tail marks. But once we had to cut away from the riverbank and slowed down, my mind started working and working, gnawing over Gary and his ranch, me and mine. Without the movement, I couldn't make it stop. I remember he had a pond way out the back end of his property. Sharon used to go out there with his twin boys who were a year older than she was and swim in it. She'd come back muddy and tan and smiling, but just as soon as I asked her how it was, her face would go flat as an old tire and she'd shrug. I used to want to tell her to at least use a condom, but I could never get myself to say it. I asked Dot about it once and she told me not to worry. I asked why not, and she just gave me this look like there was so much she knew that I could never know, and it just made her so sad that I wouldn't. So I tried not to think about it. I never doubted that there are things that go on between girls and their mamas that men will never understand. Anyway, I don't figure anymore she was sleeping with either of them. Gary told me years later he used to go out there and surprise them sometimes, turn up with a case of orange pop and make sure everybody had their clothes on. I think she thought me knowing too much about what she did for fun might be dangerous. I don't know. Sometimes I think my memory is like a dog that gets hold of something it wants to kill. It latches on with fierce jaws and then yanks it around and around and around, trying not to break its neck. Zorro picked his way up the side of an incline, out of the shade and into the sun, and all at once we come to the plain, and I could see for miles off to the south and the east, where the hills rolled through the scrub grass and junipers and pines, and I could see the white stripe of the frozen river right through the middle of the desert, where it jogged out before bending back up into the mountains, where it starts somewhere in a cold spring among the big trees. Zorro snorted, and a big plume of his breath rose around us, and then a sharp wind came and whipped it away south. I realized I had been staring at the river for some time. "Hip," I said, and nudged the horse in his sides, and we moved on. We rode high along the edge of the plain next to a sheer slope where it bluffed down toward the river. At some point we came to a spot where the trail we'd been following split. One animal had trudged off, tired but moving well, across the shallow snow of the plain toward the distant spot where the trees grew tighter together near the near the base of the big black cinder cone we call Tillicum Tit. The other had tumbled down the slope, bleeding hard. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like it had probably stood up at the bottom and cut across the frozen surface of the river. My guess was that it couldn't have gone much farther. We'd already come more than 2 miles across the high desert, and that animal had been bleeding all the way. I had a bad feeling I knew which track was Doug's. I dismounted Zorro and took one more look back across the plain as I led him over to a tree to lash him up. Rough land, red lava rock, silvery in the rising winter light. I tried to imagine it dug up and pawed over and abandoned like Gary Duchamp's place. The thought made me want to be sick. "All right, Zorro," I said as I fastened his reins to a tree. He jostled. I made sure he had enough slack to move around if he got too cold. Even in the sun, you could freeze to death on a day like this if you didn't move. I slung the rifle over my shoulder and pulled a length of rope out of one of the saddlebags. If I had to do what I thought I might have to do, I was going to need a rope. "Be a good horse," I said, and Zorro snorted again. I shifted over to the spot where Doug had gone down the embankment. The wind that blew against it meant there was little snow on the side of it there. Only behind the bigger lava rocks could it pile up a bit. Mostly it was raw, frozen earth, sharp with pebbles and cattle grass. I took it sideways, chopping my feet as deep into the ground as they would go. Now and again I would put my foot on something that looked solid, but it would break away, and the whole mass would threaten to avalanche. It was a good thing the slope was only covered about 20 or 25 feet. Much farther and I might have killed myself. At the bottom, the ground flattened out into the riverbank. Normally here the water would have been rapid, shallow, fast, dangerous. Up by our place the river is big and placid because of the little dams that have been thrown up along it, but back here it shoots through rocks no more than waist deep on a tall man, but strong enough to knock him over. On the far bank, maybe 20 feet away, a forest of ponderosa, silent and lonely in the winter, the sun threading weakly through the needles. I knew that to get from here to there would be an adventure. Rapids freeze more slowly than runs, and water still rushes underneath the ice long after it looks solid. There was a bridge a mile or so up the river, but I didn't want to walk it. I didn't want to leave Zorro standing still too long. Nope, the only thing to do was to try to walk across the rocks that poked their black heads up to the ice and trust that the treads of my boots would be good enough to give me traction. I sucked in a breath, trying not to think about what would happen if the ice broke and I fell in, and set one boot on the first rock.
We have going, so I'm a little nervous. I hope it works. But we're very excited to have Brandi Dawn Henderson here to be part of the program, sort of here, virtually here, to be part of the program, because we were extremely excited to come across her piece on Unsung Sorrow. So it will be very exciting if we get to see her face appear on the screen at some point. I don't know how this will work, though. Brandi Dawn Henderson recently completed her master's in creative nonfiction from Johns Hopkins University. She then sold all the extras, bought a one-way ticket to India, and is trying her very best to make at least one life immeasurably better. Her essay, Unsung Sorrow, pulled me in from the very first line. It is lyrical, heartbreaking, and enlightened. The piece, in fact, sings the sorrow of its subject, and thereby also the sorrows we all confront within the wider human experience. In this sense, it has made at least one life immeasurably better for having read it. It is my pleasure to introduce, live from India, Brandi Dawn Henderson.
Transcendental harmony. We nod emphatically. We believe in oneness, in our intrinsic understanding of humanity, of nature, of love. And then we see you. From a distance, you aren't unlike other hungry, worn-out men I've seen sleeping on the platforms. Strange that you are naked, though. As we get closer, I can't take my eyes off you. Something is wrong, or more wrong, with this picture. My eyes lock on your ribs, unmoving, fresh out of the rise and fall they've known for all your days, and my heart pounds wildly, as yours does not. At this moment, I find myself able to think little more than whoa, and I follow Timothy onto our train car. But each step I take over the metal insides of the machine that will leave you behind echoes the emptiness where the charade of mental harmony and order had been only moments before. We are just two foreigners in costumes, walking through a borrowed train station, trying to be what we will never be, to know what we can never fully understand. We are consumers of nirvana, and everyone knows that but us. On my train to your holy city of death, I drink more tea than I need, and I think about you as an infant, about your mother warming you with arms and breast and belly. I wonder if you'd ever been in love, if the air would go out of her lungs if she could see you now, if you had children who would fall to their knees to see their father this way. Then I stop thinking about you and start wondering about myself, why I hadn't considered using the shawl of decency draped over my shoulders to cover your bareness of gratitude, until I forgot to. Thank you.
You can hear me?
I can hear you.
It's Colin. That's what you get for making fun of the weather here earlier today.
Yeah,
She was
true.
rubbing in my face earlier today that it was 90 degrees there and snowing here. So, well, thank you for Skyping with us and making this little experimental endeavor such a success.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Do we have a question? Yeah. What time is it there?
5:38 in the morning.
That is also what you get for making fun of our weather.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that is great about Mason's Road is that we kind of market ourselves as an educational journal, with our focus on different elements of craft. And it's not just the people who submit to us or our readers that get that educational benefit, though. It's also the editorial staff. And this story that Brandi read for me is of particular interest in that regards. I met Brandi through a mutual friend of ours in her program, a great writer, Dario Di Battista. And when we launched Mason's Road, it was kind of this mass, tell all your friends to submit their stuff to us and we'll see what we get from the people that we know. And I got this story from Brandi to kind of take a look at. And as a poetry editor, I wasn't really quite sure what to do with it, but I knew that I wanted to go into teaching, creative writing at the next level, beyond the high school level that I've been teaching at. And working with Brandi on this story was such an amazing experience for me, of working outside of my genre and outside of my comfort level, and getting this piece and then seeing it taken by the nonfiction editors and hearing their comments as I just cut my mouth shut and watched the comments pile up on our submission system, to see the overwhelmingly positive response that this incredibly powerful story got. So I just wanted to personally thank you, Brandi, for really bringing out the educational side of our journal.
You're very welcome.
And for getting up disgustingly early to do this with us.
Thank you, Brandi.
Thank you.
So I'll go back to bed now.
And she's gone. So, moving right along the program. As I just mentioned, I am the poetry editors, along with Brittany Hill. And now to go into something that I do know a little bit more about poetry. In the last two issues, we've looked at voice and we've looked at setting. Setting being time and place. And the poem that we selected for our last issue by Tamara Madison, Swing, for me just really embodies all of those things, voice and time and place. There's a musicality to this poem that makes it embody all of those things. The voice is so real. Music is something that exists in all spaces, in all places, and the space of the poem on the page moves the reader through the poem, and the musicality has a tempo to it that just, again, moves the reader through the poem and makes it so perfect as an embodiment of what language is capable of doing, even without any background music to it. So Tamara is our next reader. She's, as you can read in your program, very multi-talented, and has had creative work and critical work and musical work published. She's been on recordings, and I'm going to let her poetry do for you what it did for me and speak for itself. So, Tamara.
I first want to say congratulations to Mason's Road. I think anybody who has the nerve to do anything artistic at this particular time in history, socially and economically, deserves to be commended. So I want to tell you, especially starting something, so I want to say congratulations. And thank you for the invitation. And thank you very much for the introduction that honors me in a number of ways. I'm really honored and humbled to do a reading today, April 1st. There is a generation before me that remembers where they were and what they were doing when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, or Malcolm X. There's a generation behind me that remembers where they were when Tupac was killed or Biggie died. I remember where I was April 1st when Marvin Gaye was murdered. So because of his influence for me as an artist, and it's an honor for me to read on this day. Written, poem for Sandra. After the teacher's conference with you, Daddy reported to Mama that your cheese had slipped off your cracker. Your bread was not completely baked, but you were a nice lady. I think it was the tears, the fact that you cried and were so deeply shaken when you explained to him how talented I was, gifted, very special. The fact that you were insistent that he recognize my brightness of being, brilliance. By the 5th grade, I was not only starring in the school play as Harriet Tubman, but I was writing words of all things. Words that made you cry and whisper when you met my father as if I were something, someone sacred. But I, derived from a long line of blue-collared bards of Pulpit Field and the projects where stories were told across kitchen tables more than pillows and never on the page, I wrote anyway. And because of my own tears and whispers in ink, never thought you were crazy. You knew my words as incantations, knew that one day I just might raise them in ceremony, high enough to make rain on plains of sand-blasted dreams. The family noticed, complimented me occasionally, but simply did not know what to do with me. But you, doe white woman of slipping cheese, christened me Pen Priestess. Rain dancing for Afriel. The angel, wings tucked beneath fleece hoodie, halo hidden in a Santa red ski cap, plays ball with raindrops as the neighborhood boys envy, noses pressed to dripping pains. 3 weeks, 5 days, 7 hours since my last poem. My muse on hiatus in some other lover's lap without as much as a forwarding address or postcard. I abandon pen and pad to join the angel, court raindrops, flick my flip-flops to the air, ruffle my skirt in wetness, and can smack dab in the middle of a puddle, baptizing the angel with squeals and mud buttons. I pull a moth-gnawed memory from my left breast, teach the angel to spread his arms until his chest aches, turn his palms upward, raise his face, close his eyes. Suddenly, to the holy hum of cloud come home, my muse rushes. As wings ripping fleece, the angel opens his mouth to strain of cheek, stretches out a perfectly curled tongue, kisses rain. Pays. My tongue is the island in which I live, mon pays, surrounded by a mighty sea of words and beached unrest, mon pays. Poetry, the nation from which I come, my tongue, the island. Swing. Swing was inspired by a haiku by Etheridge Knight, and so I'll read the haiku first. Making jazz swing in 17 syllables ain't no square poet's job. Etheridge Knight. Then let me be voluptuously curvaceous. No straight lines, tight corners, anal degrees. My axe honed on your haiku, Etheridge. I spit prayer, split threads of fleece, slip them through the eye of time, stitch lyric, tailor an iridescent veil to drape, shape, shimmying hips, bejeweled navel, snake arms charming the charmer. I squat on stanzas, elbow to knee, palm to cheek, head cocked, wide-legged, laughing. Response. Stiff whiff of God's navel, I translate breath. Sing the silence of moments afraid to whisper, the spaces between teeth, the blood bathed in this ink, the bastard birth with murderess as mother, poems, the dust of God's lashes, God's gray hairs, dirt beneath God's nails, lint between God's toes, poems, angel must, priest pus, nun spunk blush, cherub funk, poems, sweet bop rock of jazz future, hip-hop hallelujahs, gutted gospel, venom of Eden's serpent sweeten. You think I'm caught? Watch. Undaunted for Linwood. The kiss of lightning makes my marrow hum, shakes my tree to sweating flames. I violate the sun, confess the moon, curtsy my king, or rip him open. Shave my lion bald, feast upon his roar, leave him cleave his wilted silence. I dare to open my eyes as my breast fall out, leak my cleavage's need to poet language lush enough to sweep the knees of Jesus. Toe whipping the air, I resuscitate wind. This dance I do, this dance. And hollow poem. I am screaming silent revolution in red eye funk, sopped with Hokkei curses, wrapped in Juba tongue, screaming silent revolution, curt and cutting like Kentucky bourbon or hip-hop hooks chased with Hennessy. Perfumed with Afrofection and diasporic connections, I am screaming revolution to the haunted harmonies of South Africa, bellows of Beijing and agony of Afghani screams while trains derail and crash on the Underground Railroad, an undying ghost endlessly float in a bottomless river called the Trail of Tears, murmuring amidst the islands, shrieking in the wombs of women, weeping in the dreams of children. I am curdling croons of deceived promises and peace treaties pumped by manifest destiny, gluttonous wealth fattening itself upon itself, regurgitating its waste upon the rest of the world. I am Africa powwow, rain dancing to Buddha's base, blood betrayed by its own blood, sold by its own blood, murdered by its own blood, as fury flexes its muscle upon the land fertile with fear. Generations pass and putrefied potential struts as best dressed player of the year, pimping forgotten hope as his whore. The earth is infectiously sore, the sky infernally feverish, and the heavens just moan. Meanwhile, back on a beach of dry bones, hip-hop sons and daughters shine as Generation X evolves into Z, while night walkers run in the dark of day and peacekeepers step dance between blistering bullets bearing their names. Mantra in the making with each drop of my moon. I am the stifled peace cry, waiting to rise above the mountains and heal a wounded wind. I am screaming revolution, breathing revolution, bleeding revolution, seizing revolution, ascending evolution, Africa powwow, rain dancing to Buddha's base. Rain. Can anybody hear me?
This is the 5th time I've introduced a writer since I've been in the MFA program here. And it's the first time I'm introducing someone who isn't here. At least he's not here in the flesh. And that makes me, like Rihanna a while ago, a little bit nervous. I mean, if that technological wonder of Skype should fail us, will I have to read his work for him? Hopefully not. Luke Gerber's poetry reflects his wide interests, his learning, and his imagination. His poem, Assorted Raindrops, which appeared in the first issue of Mason's Road, follows the random thoughts of 4 raindrops as they run down the page. An excellent example of concrete poetry. But while nature fascinates him, and he began his college studies as a minor in astronomy, Luke's subject matter is truly far-ranging. How many other poets do you know that write odes to Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim? This is not so surprising when you learn that Luke is a sociology major at NYU with a minor in creative writing. Luke sees sociology as a unique combination of literature and science, of philosophy and the empirical. He also sees poetry in the same intriguing light. Luke grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family in Sharon, Massachusetts. He says he still has a strong but confused relationship with the Orthodox Jewish tradition. He's currently spending a semester in Tel Aviv, which is from where he'll be reading for us tonight, I hope. I believe he and Brandi win the prize for the writers traveling the furthest to get here, at least through electronic space. In Tel Aviv, Luke is studying the concept of pantheism and its relationship to the New Age belief systems, tolerance, and religious exclusivity. His favorite poets are James Tate, Anne Carson, who he took a course with in poetry collaboration, and Charles Simic. His poetry has also appeared in Decomp magazines, Prick of the Spindle, and The New Islander, among other publications. You might have surmised by now that Luke Gerber is a deep thinker. He's also an innovative and thought-provoking poet. Ladies and gentlemen, via the miracle of Skype, I give you Luke Gerber.
Thank you, Steve, for that really flattering introduction. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. I can't see you, so I don't really know. Hello to all of you, and shalom for those of you who speak Hebrew from Tel Aviv. This first poem is called Assorted Raindrops, and it's from a series of self-portraits. 1. Before I fall, I want to tell you a secret about 2. There are moments when I look up and forget I am falling. 3. Tell me why there is gravity, I shout into the clouds. 4. I bump into another droplet, and we are one. We will splash together. This next poem is from the same series of self-portraits, or something like that. In space. There are no mirrors. Here, the Earth is a giant balloon with glass skin. I see each particle fighting its way to the surface as if there were a fire. In space, everything is alone. There is no language, because there is no one to talk to. Another Sunday. There is a world in your head, the ant told me. Then he tiptoed up my earlobe and dived into my inner ear. This was no ordinary ant. He collected crumbs or flecks of dirt from every place he went and stored them in my walls. He dropped out of Alcoholics Anonymous a few times after his wife left him. I felt kind of bad for him, so I let him live in my walls until I caught him masturbating on my grandmother's couch. I don't know where he lives now, but he still comes by with beers every Sunday during the NFL season and to drop off crumbs and dirt for the wall. As he walked out of my ear, he said, "That's one fucked up world in there." Then he told me he ate his ex-wife for breakfast. This next poem is based on, the title is from a poem written by Rebecca Wolf. It's called The Odor of Mirror. This room odors of walk-in closet and bed with flannel sheets. This room odors of open window with moon and Glade plug-in and dresser carved from a single block of oak. Your face odors of leave and stay, your mouth of nothing and peppermint. Your hands odor of Ramada Inn soap and were born to disappear. Neither of us odors for home. I odor for you and this room, and everything outside this moment is alive. These next couple of poems are selections from a larger poem, which Steve kind of mentioned. It's centered around the works of Karl Marx. 4. Translated language. Over future languages borrow words. Hegel remarks somewhere that all great circumstances end. Paris would end, we knew. Karl Marx ended. Translated language always assimilates back into its mother tongue. 5. What Karl Marx never said. To be burnt down has always been the inevitable fate of buildings. Above are so many corroborations of grand theory. Epoch-making dwarfs existence, containing it in a single floor of a gridded building. 9. The dreamt of. On the one hand, the dreamt of is unfruitful deception at the end of its tether. On the other, it is the instrument underhanding reality, incalculable and ungeometrical. 14. Infinity. After we destroyed Paris, we continued. Infinity was the embryonic, the illusory sun about which man revolved. Infinity was the heart of our heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. It was the opium. Proverb has it, what is shouted in the forest, nevertheless remains an object secondary. We didn't agree. We'd lost our proverbs in the war and deconstructed our poetry into words, into letters, into lines, into curves, and nothing was left. And this poem is called For Debbie. My sister's dead, she never said it to me. She hadn't planned on the world still being around after her sister. I brought her the Flintstones vitamins with iron and smiled. She was anemic. I thought that if she ingested enough iron, she would become medical inside. Instead, she popped antidepressants and family pictures in her never-left dorm room and was no longer anemic. Many times I searched the library for a manual, counselors for some guidelines. We were on our own island, though, pioneering a way to overcome death, and nothing told us how we would one day be in the future. I just want to thank Mason's Road again for hosting this event, and thank you all for having me here. This last poem is called He, She Erasure on Being. 1. He rolled on the revelation in his bleacher seat, didn't utter a breath. Sneaker dust lights above them. Even the night looked as if couldn't tell if this was real, but it was the closest he'd ever get. He tickled her ribs. That was being. It was just to say, beautiful was that. 2. She fell asleep at the kitchen table. He carried her to bed and didn't ask any questions. She grumbled that nobody else really was. Evening continued. There weren't nearly enough years. For the most part, she traced his spine, counting uncertain little words, fingers in her hair. 3. The radio was going. He knew somehow life was going too. The distance charcoaled. She waited for when the streetlights eased into night, and her arm, his shoulder contour, seemed the only. Lost in the void, she could easily reach that time he put one soft hand on her bone. There were no stars, like only they could have been anything. 4. Wearing only moonlight, he relished the gentle of her. But hopeless seeped into his tongue, and into what would be a Wednesday evening. He knew something. They'd live, and in one little lifetime. Then, turning to the love seat, eyes widening, his name echoing, hands grazing her bony knee. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.
Do I turn the video off now?
Bye. Turn it off.
It works.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Enjoy the rest of the reading.
Technology grant. First, I'd like to say that it was such a pleasure working on the first 2 issues of Mason's Road and working with Yana, who is an extraordinarily talented writer and also an extraordinarily talented editor. And I'd like to thank the readers who gave so generously of their time and their insights and their often strong opinions about the submissions. Very interesting process. In looking for creative nonfiction to include in the 2nd issue, Yana and I were hoping to find pieces in which the writers evoked specific places and time that were in some way irresistible. Standoff at Ronnie's Place was just such a piece. Intensely emotional, yet remarkably restrained. This was writing that insisted, from the first line to the last, that we stand still and pay complete attention. In reading this essay, I felt as if I were standing in the rain with the narrator, battling the elements in a place that was both beloved and haunted, confronting the past in order to be able to move forward. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Catherine Kraft, former ballet critic, who gives talks on writing, helps run 2 Pennsylvania writers' conferences, hosts writing retreats for women, and even calls her freelance editing service writingpartner.com. She is the author of Standoff at Ronnie's Place, and she has traveled from Pennsylvania to join us this evening.
Can't tell you directly how much it means to me to be here tonight to share this with each of you, but for me this is what it's all about. and this is my voice. Thank you for listening. I love that. It's also my story, and thank you for listening. I wrapped myself in my parka and headed into the storm. Max tried to wriggle his way out when I opened the door. He'd been anxious without Ron, wanting to stick close. I'd even broken my own rule and allowed him to start sleeping on my bed. But today I pushed him back. Stay, boy. He looked up in worry, seeking my eyes, but I needed to walk through this door alone. Rain pelted the tin roof of a porch whose burden weighed on me, stalled me. From Ron's mother, the peeling metal glider with its squashed plastic seat pads and metal chairs so rusty no one ever used them. Only barn cats sat on the teak love seat. We bought it in a moment of romantic whimsy and never bothered to keep it clean. A wheelbarrow full of shovels, work gloves, and pickaxes. The boys, just 8 and 10, were gamely helping me lay a new gravel on a driveway perpetually washed out. In the corner, an array of cobweb-laden balls and rackets from play long forgotten. I'd always wanted a porch lined with rocking chairs. I flipped up my hood. I couldn't afford to let my energy spill all over the place, so I stepped down onto the old brick walk. It had been flush with the porch when Ron and I married 15 years earlier. Even the bricks had had trouble holding up. In a dozen strides, I reached the parking area at the top of the driveway. The animals were tucked away out of the rain, but the horses nickered when they heard my shoes against the gravel. Chickens clucked from the other end of the barn. Yellow leaves dove from their branches. From my pocket, I pulled my bold declaration. I kicked aside some leaves, unfolded the page onto the stones, and exposed my words. A stiff November wind tried to flip the paper away, even as rain pasted it to the surface. Go, stay. Yes, no. I stomped on its edge. I was done with indecision. I would take this step and take it here at the very heart of the property where Ron and I had built our life together. I held a butane lighter to the paper, flick, flick, but couldn't get it to ignite. Our sons were at school. My only witnesses were buildings set into a hillside. The 200-year-old farmhouse behind me, the Pennsylvania Bank barn in front of me, and the deep semicircle of outbuildings between the two that rimmed a grassy courtyard. Generations of memories pulsed through the beams of this old farm. It was no stranger to the cycles of life and death, hope and despair. Directly across the courtyard from where I stood, Ron's woodworking shop stared me down. We'd built it on the foundation of an old pig barn to house tools whose names he loved: radial arm saw, router, drill press, each necessary to make his dreams for this farm come true. Over the years, we gutted and renovated every room of the house, adapted the bank barn for horses, and restored several of the sheds, but he was never happier than when designing and outfitting that shop. One Christmas, I'd had a Pennsylvania Dutch hex sign painted for him, which he proudly attached beside the shop door, Ronnie's Place. He'd spent long hours out there organizing shelves of screws and nails, and even longer hours seated at his desk beneath them, drinking whiskey and appeasing credit card companies with scant payments. Now, only the shards of glass still clinging to its window frames and a lingering stench of mace bore the honest marks of tragedy. But I knew to look for the circle faded onto its rough-hewn siding, and the wood near the door handle, now splintered from forced entry. The 3 concrete steps, freshly painted gray, to hide the evidence, to neutralize the horror. The hiss of rain, a howling wind, the hoof stomping of nervous horses, Max whining inside, a rush of memory. Only weeks before, Special Emergency Response Team troops took cover behind these buildings, the telescopic sights of their rifles trained on the shop, Ronnie's Place, sidearms strapped to their thighs, pockets swollen with ammunition, camouflage uniforms whose jackets were 3D leafy and said police across the back. pants tucked into laced-up boots, black body shields, bulletproof vests, helmets, goggles, bullhorns. Leave your weapon inside and exit the building. We can help you. Ron cowered inside, his dreams eroded by alcohol. His final act, marking with blood splatter, words scrawled at a dramatic pitch, "Till death do us part." The same geometry of the building steadied me. Even the ancient chicken shed, with its sagging floor and listing piers, was still weathering storms. Why wouldn't this paper burn already? I flicked the lighter again. The paper damp, the ink blurred, the flame licking at it as threatening as Max's soft pink tongue. Circumstances be damned. I would create my own reality. I could not allow Ron the last word. For weeks, horror had been pounding my skull, freeze-drying my stomach, nerves frazzled, buzzing so I couldn't sleep. Talking about what happened over and over, fried in that high-voltage moment, as powerless to leave as a woman strapped to an electric chair. I was as bound to Ron in death as I had been in life. Despite his twist on our vow, Ron's death did not feel like the end of our marriage. As the widow, my life was still defined by him. I needed to divorce him. So I wrote my own decree, longhand, and signed my full legal name at the bottom. I wanted this to be both personal and businesslike. I'd reach out to him across death's divide by sending my wishes on flames. I had not predicted the storm, but out in the driveway that day I welcomed the rain after all. Instant conflagration would not have been as cathartic. And divorce should be effortful, and I was ready to face off with Mother Nature to make it happen. I squeezed past my fretful dog to fetch a golf umbrella from the house and try again. The wind whipped it back and bullets of rain pummeled my face, but I prevailed and pulled the umbrella down to shield the paper. Despair may have grabbed hold of Ron, but the boys and I would not go down without a fight. And I would fuel our fight with whatever I had on hand. Flick, anger. Flick, disappointment. Flick, obstinacy. Flick, irrational hope. An edge caught, sputtered. I watched the paper blacken and curl. When my words were no longer recognizable, I rose and let the wind scatter the ashes. Rain rolled down the unreadable faces of the outbuildings. The grass was still browning. This rain would not revive it. Yet it was a season of change. The trees would soon stand naked against the sky. And the shift within me was essential. I shut the umbrella, stood for a moment with my face turned toward the cleansing rain and whatever meager light the day had to offer, and returned to the house to dry off. My children would soon be home, and they needed me.
What is forthcoming in the Madison Review, Enderlo, Pyrene's Fountain, Willow's Wept Review, the Prose Poem Project, and Foundling Review. Her poems have been recently nominated for the 2012 Pushcart Prize and the Sundress Best of the Net 2010 Anthology. She lives with her fiancé in Jersey City, New Jersey, where she teaches creative movement. One thing that I look for when I read poetry is a voice, and a confident voice. So I'd like to personally say thank you to Kathleen for bringing the 21st century woman voice to Masons Road, because I know myself, I have been on a never-ending date since high school. So please aid me in welcoming Kathleen Kraft.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm glad to be a part of this exciting event at Masons Road at Fairfield University. It's also nice to be back here in Fairfield. I used to come here several years ago to visit my brother and his family when they lived here. And we would take a walk down the street to the Firehouse Deli. I have very good memories of eating really good sandwiches. And that brings me to my poems. Like many of us, I often associate places and experiences and relationships with food. So I'm going to read several poems along that theme tonight. Actually, this first poem explores our relationship with technology and little devices and the way that they impact how we relate to each other. Arietta. An arietta is a short song, like an aria. In the mini screen, the where, the pod, the very thin things we click. Send and receive, caress in 8-point. Text me, don't text me. No plan, call me, no land. No line between us. We connect through the space that breaks, unpauses. What? No, you go first. We touched, encoded and pulsing, trolls of the personalized play. Hands free in the flowless waves. Check, did you check? I can't open. Minimize unopened attachments. Get higher in the definition. Be half-mute love, moving the bar. I can't hear you. You're on a what? I'm home, which could be anywhere. I'm around the corner. Oh, there you are. Hang on. I'm shutting. Flipped, topped. Everything's cheap now, we sing to ourselves. Hum, tap, chatted alone. Load me up. Things have never been things. Things are better between us. So let me know when you're free. And I'll read my ballad that is on the site. It's a tale about a dinner date that takes a turn. Ballad of the never-ending date. Mike was in the makeup biz, slung his shadows daily. He stayed up late and drank too much, schnapps, dark rum, and Baileys. He took me out for Italian and looked into my eyes, then slurped his oiled salad while I crunched my oh my's. What else you like to eat? I tried. Oh, anything, he said. Vietnamese or Thai, I posed. He shrugged and bent his head. Tuesday was the second date, Thai on River and 3rd. He pushed the meat around his plate, a badly wounded bird. He choked on the cilantro and then on his Coke. He slid off to the bathroom, then almost told a joke. You're like a girl from Woodstock. I waited. Is that so? Yup, he winked and sputtered as I chewed this guy slow. He drove me to my doorstep, then quickly locked the doors. Joking, he laughed too loudly as I breathed through my pores. But a sweetness was about him, that I must now admit, in spite of the greasy fingers, the polyester knit, and the eerie eye that rolled, and the quivering lip. Something in his tone of voice beckoned softly as a slip. It wooed me till the twilight hour and whispered as I slept, caressed me gently as I woke, then led me to his step. So ladies, I am asking, have you ever met a man who repulsed you through and evenly, then given him your hand? That's the 21st century. So this is another one that explores how our tastes change. Evening meditation after fight with boyfriend. My burger and I swelter in the breezeless window. How together we are, lovely amongst ourselves. Salt cures my hunger. Squish of meat and bun contains me. I perspire beneath sweet onion's bite, shiver with pickles' pleasing spear. If you were here, you'd ask me to think about beef. Last time it was wheat. Your fingers tapped while I ate crackers. Vague moon man, distant face, hang in the sky, leave me happy in the fat of daylight, mopping blue cheese grease from a chipped plate. And this one's about a very special love affair. It's called Love Letter to My Lost Fish Spatula. I loved the way you looked, a big, wide fork tapering down to a cherry handle, just enough heft. The way you slid beneath my tilapia, discreetly elevating my 2 3-ounce pieces. I dreamt up recipes with you in mind, perused the fish case with renewed awe. The way I could leave you on a pan, a low flame flickering, you were always cool when I returned. You weren't made for dancing, but the way we moved together and apart, the way we made a thing soft and biteable, how you glistened afterwards, how I rubbed you carefully dry, your wood handle nicked with wear, then tucked you safely away. You didn't rest for long. We seared summer off, pressed and flipped through fall. Then the snow fell. I moved, and now I can't find you anywhere. I'm considering replacing you if you don't turn up soon. And this next one is kind of a short nursery rhyme love poem I wrote a while back in the hopes that I would meet someone to share it with, and I did. Sorry. It's called Love Poems for Bernard. I didn't plan on this part.
I hear you.
Love poems. I'll slip one on after a shower. I'll sear one on the stove. I'll dream one on a flower and sing one down a cove. And then we'll talk and do the things we like to do. And then some more. Then I'll make one out of wet sand and send 2 out to sea. I'll plant one on the neighbor's land, and I'll draw one on my knee. And then we'll both be tired, so I'll put us to bed, and then you'll put us to bed. Come morning, we'll sip one with our bread. And I'll close with a poem about nature. Just change it up a little bit. This is called Fairview Road, Monterey, Massachusetts. On a personal note, it's where we grew up. My brother's here tonight, and we grew up in the city, but we go to Massachusetts, and so this place is a very special place to me. What happens here is vast and particular. I am just one bulk of movement among the green wave of trees. The nettles brush my fingertips when I'm not looking, and I love the itch, the sting that remains. I am happy with the cow, whose head is bent down fully, admitting her interest in the grass. My heart beats hungry on the road. There is nothing like this brazen solitude, this freedom to be sad, where sadness is another growing thing, or element, like the stillness of the broccoli-headed mountain, or the rusted harrow nailed to the pasture's open space. Thank you again.
Which is themed ARC, and it's been a really exciting road so far. Not only is it a durable name, but you can just stretch that metaphor forever. It's great. It's actually my great pleasure to announce tonight that for issue 3, we have our first $1,000 Creative Writing Prize that will be judged by Sarah Manguso. We had recently secured her as the judge, and she's just absolutely honored, and we're thrilled to have her. She's the author, most recently, of the memoir, The Two Kinds of Decay, 2008, and it was named an editor's choice by the New York Times Sunday Book Review and Best Book of the Year by the San Francisco Chronicle and Time Out Chicago, and was published in 5 countries. Her next book, The Guardians, a Prose Elegy, is forthcoming in 2012. Her collection of very short stories, Hard to Admit and Harder to Escape, published in 2007, was included with collections by Dave Eggers, Deb Olin Unferth, and McSweeney's 145 Stories in a Small Box. Her poetry collections and accomplishments just go on and on. We're absolutely thrilled to have her. Find out more about her at sarahmanguso.com and tell everyone you know about our $1,000 contest. Very exciting. Are we able to get her back?
should just call her. Or call her cell phone.
In the meantime, I'm also announcing the student reading of the student reading of Inspired Voices. Our MFA students are wonderful readers, and it's always great when they can be a little bit more in the public eye. Pequot Library, Tuesday, April 12th at 7 p.m., and that's in Southport, Connecticut. A whole slew of our fantastic MFA writers will be reading there. And while they're fast at work over there with their Skype, maybe they've stopped. Round of applause for the Fairfield University Media Center and Lisa Calderon for to see Joseph Jordan, and we are just so grateful for all of our readers for being here tonight and for all of you. Thank you again. Please enjoy our plethora of snacks and have a wonderful evening. Thanks for supporting Mason's Road.
Do we have any newly accepted students here tonight?
Oh, do we have newly accepted students here tonight? Stand.
One.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to start reading while I have you. So it's titled Follow Fields. Let me speak to you as you like, with pretty language flowing through manicure's Zen garden of sense. I understand that preference viscerally. As a young writer, I used to roll sentences of the tongue to taste their sweetness, edible sugar pearl flowers, arranged in lovely bouquets, breathing freshness and beauty onto the graceful page. But now, as leaving teaches me about life, words come rougher and less hewn, in clouds, still fresh, but pungent. They demand that I dig my fingers into them, that I let their earthiness smear my nails with dirt. They're more alive in some sense, but less pretty. They demand that I accept their potential as they are. Minerals and water and mud and nutrient, beetles' wings, dried up skeletons of cockroaches, roots, weeds, the husk of wild bird seeds, messy, yet ordered, alive. But how to present a pot filled with clods and asks, do you smell the life in this dirt? Do you see the gods in this crumbling soil? Do you find the seed of lilies and azaleas in its tangles of weeds? It's a prayer to a dead god to hope to dump the whole mess of this rich earth and hope that someone may see how life permeates it and wants to move through it, upwards, in beautiful tendrils of green, budding with a promise of a different kind of art, something not so pretty, a little bit thorny maybe, and wild. The time of no time. 3 unfinished novels languish unnurtured fetuses, half alive, half still forming in the womb of my laptop's hard drive, rotating in unimaginable spins of megabytes, coagulations of words just barely with a heartbeat, longing to be fed, to be nurtured. I, the renegade mother, I have postponed what my biology demands of me with the rigors of economy, with a job that permits no time outside of grading persuasion papers and oral synthesis. I am the American adjunct at a college too small to appreciate the rigors of art, too large to forgive lapsed time, a phenomena of oppression just bursting to turn into revolution. A revolutionary has no motherhood, cannot afford the luxury of motherhood. My novels are patient. They nudge me gently when I'm lecturing, when I'm thinking of the children I could have had if I'd stuck to my original plan of seeking a job in editing rather than through academia. The novels remind me that I'm 7 years since my last book, that I'm pushing the limits of what is acceptable of an academic scholarship, even here in rural Georgia. My unborn children remind me that I'm already past the age of motherhood without science, that I should call back the strange doctor who talks of firing up my uterus with drugs. I fill my time with grant writing and course proposals, student conferences, listserv commentaries on the status of budget cuts and their influence on scholastic standards. I'm seeking escape routes from the womb. Oops. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. I'm abandoned with her children, half-warmed, whose telepathic cries I hear in the night. I dread coming here to this place of attention and nurturing. It is without beauty, a sinister place threatening failure, populated by amorphous shapes that swat at my face like the claws of a perfect predator, taunting me with the smells I don't recognize, a history I don't remember, of landscapes far away. This is the place where all mistakes are made. If I could see it, this is what my womb would look like. A place of discontent and blood, a place of permeations, hellishly steaming and crampy. In here, anything is possible, but the burden of possibility rests in places obscure where the fragile ovule of art is attached perilously to thorny sawtoothed vines. I must somehow detach it without damaging my perfect ovule, without breaking it or altering its shape out of potential perfection. It must be seduced, wooed in ways primitive and instinctual, such labor so unfamiliar to the overburdened teacher. I would rather do anything at all than be here. I would rather draw schedules, compose rubrics, redesign assignments, seek more grants, where my language need not bear the self-effacing demands of nurturing motherhood. At night, I lay awake, aware of my husband's peaceful breathing. I ponder my teaching profession, asking why it has so overwhelmed the desire to seek artistic pasture, to till and sow and water and seek budding rewards of ordered words. Instead of art, I nurture strategies. I hungrily seek out calls for submission and calculate the odds, and I order prearranged submissions, first to the less than 1%, then to the less than 10% journals. Only if already November, 1 month from evaluation time, submit to the lesser-known journals. I line up my oldest children, comb and brush and powder them with blush and send them off in their best Sunday clothes with smiles and practiced introductions. Strategy, I tell them, and I kiss them on the forehead as I send them off, hoping to soon receive a letter. I won't be coming home again this time, Mother. I used to be driven out of sleep with the desire to touch, be close, breathe in the very heartbeats of prose, to trace its imperfect curves, pruning through its branches for the tender new buds. And love, always love, like showers of new dew, like rain and sun, and the pointed abdomen of bees. I looked forward to experiencing writing on my body, through my senses. Now this is a frightening, unconscious place where I go to shape my children, to will creation out of the nightmares of no time, rushing out of art. After my first book, the agent wanted my novel. They asked, "Where is it?" I'd just given birth to my first child, still numb with pain and gently cradling my creation, wondering if it would ever lift open its wet eyelids. But agents wanted novels. The one I first gave away was a stunningly tragic toddler whose hands still curved like the fists of newborns. One agent accepted it, but only after I signed a contract, and then he asked me to change my child, to paint her hair blue and her lips white, and to dress her in the clothes of a clown. "Make it funny," he said. My child was too tragic. Its neck looped like a question mark left hanging upside down to dry. "Chop it off," said the agent. "No one loves a victim." I rushed in and out of art. I hold a watch to my ear, like the pragmatist rabbit of Lewis Carroll's fantasies. I lecture my fetuses with chart, which label muscles and bones, which map out the course of arteries and veins. This is what you must aspire to, I tell my novels. I nudge their progress and pull out their crooked teeth with pliers, commanding them to grow new ones quickly, like shark teeth. Tenure doesn't wait. A writer whose first print does not exhaust a 2,000 copy run will never publish another novel, I explain. Words that frighten my creation deeper into dank caves mined with sharp stalagmite picks. Sacred egg. My friend, the Wicca priestess, grows me a spell. I ask her offhandedly, but immediately she begins to consider the astrological implications. "The new moon is in Pisces," she says. "Better if we wait for the Virgo moon, more auspicious for new beginnings." I don't understand the complexity of this astrology, but I nod, feeling touched by its profoundness. I used to dedicate my prose to the moonlight, some shred of ancestral memory inside me, reminding me that the moon is the patroness of women writers, patient, observant, effacing itself periodically only to return pregnant and glowing. My friend Tina gives me an egg, or rather its shell, painted in yellow and hollowed out of its yolk. She tells me yellow is for my third energy center, the chakra of willpower, aligned with my will to coincide with my higher will. Inside she puts candle colored in gold for the fire of inspiration, camellia petals for gratitude and prosperity, and a feather for mental clarity. She sends me a note with her spell. I blessed and consecrated your talisman with incense, a blend I call hope, and sesame oil for opening stubborn doors and finding hidden riches. It's now soaking in the Reiki bowl. I'll close it soon and you can have it. Either keep it close or put it out of sight and mind. I started with an egg, the symbol of promise and potential contained in the moment, containers for intention. Kept with the bird imagery, with the swallows and the feather, the idea that your book must fly out into the world and be received in a way that honors its worth, in a way that serves the highest good. The sesame worked to remove obstacle, just like in the Arabian Nights, open sesame. And the camellia had twofold purpose. It draws prosperity, yes, but it's also about being grateful. I can't explain why this seemed appropriate, but perhaps you get it. No matter what it looks like, you must trust that the petition has been heard and answered, and the rest will follow. Like spring follows winter, like an egg eventually hatches, like the bird eventually flies and leaves home, and then comes home again. This is the letting go part. Later she adds, build an altar to the moon, and bless your garden in the moonlight. Prepare the earth for planting and yourself for change. Blessed be. Blessed be. In the morning, hours before I find and read my Wicca friend's instruction, I have a gentle nudge from the universe, a tugging for gratitude. I know that I'm lucky. If I give birth to stillborn, still I am a teacher. Wise, owl-headed Athena, guarding my fledgling student, writing from danger. How excited I get over the newly hatched ideas, how their words spread tremulous wings on the page, how hawkish I defend it from the snakes of premature criticism. I eat of my art, a nourishing dirt of poisonous centipedes and dry beetle wings, yes, but always within the great girth of art's mercy. I am reminded this morning by the soundless voice of conscience to open up my heart to the blessing of life. One must be open to receive. Very fortunate. I make my altar with a quartz crystal, a hanging water votive holder, a glimmering moth clip, a clay fairy sitting on a turtle, which my 5-year-old nephew gifted me with the preface, I had to pick one that looked most like you, Auntie. The cardboard box calls my clay fairy Fortune. I place her on a dried up stump of tree. I dust the stump off and light the votive, the incense, 2 gold candles, place 2 moonflower seeds on my altar, one next to the egg and one inside it, to add my own energy to the talisman. I add a granite rock to ground my wish. I place 2 chocolate eggs inside the nest of tissue paper and a green heart chakra, green pod that holds my talisman safe. I bless it with incense and seal the egg with gold wax. I leave out 2 offerings to the moon, grapes and chocolate, for sweetness and prosperity. I plant tulip bulbs in my garden and shooting stars and the rest of the moonflower seeds. I water them with a bowl that comes from the moon-blessed altar. I draw Reiki symbols on my egg, holding it in my hands, and I meditate to the universe. I'm not schooled in writing, but like art, it flows out of me. It nudges me from the heart and into the unbidden consciousness that moves my hands, my fingers, tells me what to do, guides me towards the soft earth, the evening dusk, the first flashes of moonlight. What I want most is to touch my art again, to stop marshalling it in football formation, blowing up eclectically into my whistle, and rather coax it out of the earth with sunlight and love. I hold my egg to my breast. I feel the pulsing of love in my 3rd chakra, at the point in my belly where the uterus swells with the pride of motherhood. and I hold still for the universe to come to me, to whisper its sweetness, to break the birthing waters and let them flood. And that's it. Thank you so much again.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Thank you so much for that beautiful reading. I just wanted to say a few words because Elizabeth Hiltz, my nonfiction editor, and I and our team of readers were really blown away by your piece, by its use of language, and maybe even more so by the truth that it reveals about what it can mean to do this type of work. And I don't know about anybody else, but it feels really nice to be out celebrating all of this. So,
Thank you so much.
So we really, really appreciate that you were able to make it and be so patient through all of these technical difficulties.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Good luck to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
So thank you to everyone else for coming. We're really excited about the upcoming issue and of course about the past issues. And, so now we can have a good time and mingle and talk about how great all of these wonderful readings were. Have a nice night.